Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is looking warm today, with a high of 82.3 degrees and a low of 56.4. Coming up on today's show, we'll examine the potential impact of Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico and how they might transform trade relationships across North America. Then, we'll investigate why California's legislation, designed to boost housing development, isn't actually resulting in new homes being built. Plus, we'll explore an unusual protest from British musicians who are releasing a completely silent album as a creative strategy to combat artificial intelligence. All this and more on today's edition of Alex's News. In economic news, President Trump's planned tariffs on Canada and Mexico are set to take effect next month. For more on this developing story, we're joined by our economic correspondent, Ethan Parker. Ethan, what can you tell us about these tariffs and why they're being implemented now?
Thanks, Grace. According to the Associated Press, President Trump has confirmed that tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico will begin next month, ending what was a month-long suspension. The president stated these tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule, as part of his broader plan for what he calls reciprocal taxes, to address what he considers unfair import practices from other countries.
Can you break down exactly what these tariffs will look like when they take effect?
Certainly. The tariffs are scheduled to begin around March 4th, which is just 1 week from today. Based on reporting from Perplexity, they'll include 25% tariffs on most goods imported from Mexico, 25% on most goods from Canada, and a slightly lower 10% tariff on Canadian energy products, including oil and electricity. These tariffs were originally signed in executive orders on February 1st, but were temporarily paused after both countries pledged to enhance their border policing efforts.
What's the administration's rationale for implementing these tariffs?
As CNBC has reported, President Trump claims, "We've been taken advantage of." The initial February 4th implementation date was delayed by 30 days specifically to give both Canada and Mexico time to address U.S. concerns over border security and the flow of undocumented migrants and illegal drugs, particularly fentanyl. The administration views these tariffs as leverage to push for stronger border enforcement from our neighbors.
There must be economic concerns about such significant tariffs. What are economists saying about the potential impact?
The concerns are substantial, Grace. According to the Associated Press, economists and business leaders warn these tariffs could hurt economic growth and worsen inflation, despite Trump's claims they'll generate revenue to reduce the federal deficit and create jobs. Perplexity reports the impacts could include reduced U.S. economic growth and potential job losses ranging from 177,000 to 400,000 in the U.S. alone, with even more severe job losses in Canada and Mexico.
How might average Americans feel these effects in their daily lives?
That's a critical question. Yahoo News reports that the Yale University Budget Lab estimates these tariffs could depress average U.S. incomes by $1,170 to $1,245 a year. We're also looking at higher consumer prices across many sectors, with some vehicles potentially costing up to $3,000 more. Major retailers like Walmart have already expressed concerns about uncertainty, and the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index has declined due to tariff and inflation fears.
How are Canada and Mexico responding to these impending tariffs?
According to CNBC, both countries have previously announced plans for retaliatory tariffs on American imports if these U.S. tariffs go into effect. However, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has voiced confidence in reaching agreements before the deadline. Perplexity reports that Canada has committed to a $1.3 billion border security plan, while Mexico plans to reinforce its border with 10,000 National Guard members in attempts to address Trump's concerns.
Is there a broader strategy at play here, beyond just Canada and Mexico?
Absolutely. These tariffs are part of a larger trade strategy that includes tariffs on Chinese imports and plans for reciprocal tariffs on other trading partners. The CNBC reports that China has already retaliated with tariffs on U.S. imports, raising fears of an escalating global trade war. French President Emmanuel Macron has expressed hope that Trump could be convinced to avoid such a scenario, emphasizing the importance of cooperation and shared prosperity.
Thank you, Ethan, for that comprehensive breakdown of this complex economic situation. We'll continue to follow developments as we approach that March 4th implementation date.
You're welcome, Grace. It's certainly a story with significant implications for consumers, businesses, and international relations.
In our second story today, we're looking at California's ongoing housing crisis. Despite a flurry of pro-housing legislation in recent years, a new report suggests these laws aren't delivering the promised results. Joining us to discuss this is our housing correspondent, Chloe Parker. Chloe, what's happening with California's housing laws?
Grace, a comprehensive new report from YIMBY Law has found that California's ambitious pro-housing laws have had limited to no impact on increasing the state's housing supply. According to their analysis released this month, 5 major state laws passed since 2021 that were specifically designed to remove barriers to building denser housing have largely failed to generate significant new development.
That's surprising given how much attention these laws received when they passed. Which specific laws are we talking about here?
As CalMatters reports, the laws include SB 9, which effectively ended single-family zoning in California, AB 2011 and SB 6, which were meant to transform commercial spaces like strip malls and office parks into apartments, and SB 4, which allows religious organizations to build affordable housing on their land. Despite their promise, the numbers are quite disappointing.
Can you share some of those statistics with us?
The numbers are stark, Grace. According to the YMBY Law Report, SB 9, which passed in 2021 and allows single-family homes to be split into duplexes, only resulted in 140 units being permitted in all of 2023. AB 2011 saw just 2 projects receive local approval in 2023 and 8 in 2024. Even more concerning, SB 6, which is similar to AB 2011 but with stricter labor requirements, hasn't been utilized for a single project. And SB 4, which passed in 2024, has yet to see any projects take advantage of its provisions.
What's behind this lack of progress? Is it just bureaucratic red tape?
It's a combination of factors. CalMatters reporting indicates that many of these laws were compromised during the legislative process with additional requirements and loopholes. These include mandates for union labor, affordability requirements, and various other conditions that make projects financially unfeasible. Additionally, local governments have found creative ways to circumvent the law's intentions.
Are there economic factors at play as well?
Absolutely, Grace. According to Perplexity API, interest rates remain elevated at around 6% in 2025, which is slightly better than the 6.8% we saw in 2023, but still high enough to make borrowing expensive for developers. Construction costs continue to be inflated due to persistent inflation and high material costs. The construction industry is also still dealing with labor shortages, which lead to delays and increased costs.
Is there any bright spot in California's housing development landscape?
There is one success story worth noting. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, have seen remarkable growth with over 28,000 permits issued in 2023 alone. CalMatters points out that this success likely stems from fewer regulatory hurdles compared to other housing development types. This contrast really highlights how the additional conditions placed on other housing laws may be hampering their effectiveness.
What's being done to address these issues?
California Assemblymember Matt Haney has indicated that the state legislature will be evaluating existing pro-production laws to determine why they're not working as intended. Perplexity API notes that recent legislation like Senate Bill 450 has already aimed to modify SB 9 to clarify affordable housing definitions and streamline local approvals. We're also seeing some cities take initiative, like San Francisco, which recently implemented reforms to earn the pro-housing designation to accelerate housing development.
Thank you, Chloe, for that comprehensive look at California's housing challenges. It certainly seems like passing laws is just the beginning of addressing this complex crisis.
That's right, Grace. The YMBY Law Report serves as an important reminder that effective implementation and addressing economic realities are just as crucial as the legislation itself.
Thanks again for that report, Chloe. We'll be right back with our third story after this short break. Here are some other headlines. A federal judge has refused to immediately restore the Associated Press's access to the White House after it was banned for not fully complying with the Trump administration's renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Judge Trevor McFadden, while noting that case law is uniformly unhelpful to the White House, ruled that the AP had not demonstrated irreparable harm. The AP argues the ban violates its First Amendment rights, while the White House maintains that presidential access is a privilege, not a right. The dispute began when the AP continued using Gulf of Mexico in its reporting, despite acknowledging Trump's rechristening. The Supreme Court has declined to hear a challenge to laws establishing buffer zones around abortion clinics, effectively upholding these protective measures nationwide. The case originated in Carbondale, Illinois, where an anti-abortion group sued over a 100-foot buffer zone ordinance. Both a federal district court and the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals had previously upheld the law, citing the Supreme Court's $2,000 precedent in Hill v. Colorado. Justice Clarence Thomas dissented, arguing that buffer zones contradict First Amendment principles. Illinois has become a key destination for abortion services since Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022. A mid-air collision between two small aircraft at Arizona's Marana Regional Airport has claimed 2 lives and raised questions about safety at airports without air traffic control towers. The February incident involved a Cessna 172S and a Lancair 360, with 2 fatalities occurring in one aircraft while occupants of the other plane escaped injury. The National Transportation Safety Board is leading the investigation. Marana is an uncontrolled field where pilots must communicate their positions using a common traffic advisory frequency. The crash comes amid several recent aviation incidents across North America, including a collision between an Army helicopter and commercial airliner in Washington, D.C. Apple shareholders are expected to reject a proposal to eliminate the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs during an upcoming vote. The proposal, submitted by the conservative National Center for Public Policy Research, argues that DEI initiatives expose Apple to litigation and financial risks, especially following the Supreme Court's 2023 ruling against affirmative action in university admissions. Apple's board has recommended voting against the proposal, stating it's unnecessary and attempts to micromanage business strategy. Despite growing conservative backlash against DEI programs, Apple maintains these initiatives are integral to its business success and ethical practices. House Speaker Mike Johnson is pushing forward with a budget plan crucial to implementing Trump's agenda, but faces resistance from within Republican ranks. The plan, which would extend the 2017 tax cuts and includes revenue from tariffs, has met skepticism from swing district Republicans concerned about deep Medicaid cuts. Johnson hopes to pass the legislation by early April, a timeline many consider overly ambitious. The speaker's relationship with Trump has deepened since defending him during impeachment proceedings, with both men discussing plans for 2025. Some MAGA hardliners have expressed dissatisfaction with Johnson's leadership, while the thin House majority continues to complicate legislative efforts. In our third story today, British musicians are taking a unique approach to protest proposed changes to UK copyright law. The silent treatment has never been so loud. Joining us with more on this story is our entertainment correspondent, Ethan Parker. Ethan, tell us about this unusual album that's making noise without making any sound.
Grace, it's quite the creative protest. According to BBC News, more than 1,000 British musicians have released what they're calling a silent album titled, Is This What We Want? The album literally contains recordings of empty studios and performance spaces. No music, just silence.
That's certainly a powerful statement. Who are some of the artists involved in this protest?
We're talking about some of Britain's most celebrated musicians. BBC News reports that Annie Lennox, Damon Albarn, and Kate Bush are among the participants. Yahoo News UK adds that Yusuf, formerly known as Cat Stevens, and actor-musician Riz Ahmed have also joined the protest. The track titles on the album actually spell out a message opposing the government's plan, and all profits are being donated to the charity Help Musicians.
So what exactly are these artists protesting? What changes is the UK government proposing?
At the heart of this issue, Grace, is how AI companies can use artists' work. The UK government has proposed allowing AI companies to use copyrighted material without obtaining a license to train their AI models. According to BBC News, the only way artists could prevent this would be by explicitly opting out. Critics argue this completely reverses the traditional copyright approach, where permission must be granted before use.
That sounds like it could place a significant burden on artists. How would this opt-out system work in practice?
That's precisely the concern. As BBC News explains, artists would need to actively monitor and protect their work across the entire internet, which is practically impossible for most creators. Instead of AI companies needing to seek permission, creators would have to constantly search for unauthorized uses and file opt-out notices. The consultation on these proposed changes, called Copyright and Artificial Intelligence, was initiated in December 2024 and just closed today, according to Perplexity.
Has the government responded to these concerns from the music industry?
The Department for Science, Innovation, and Technology has stated that no final decisions have been made yet. They've emphasized that they believe the current copyright regime is hindering both creative industries and the ATI sector. However, this silent album is part of a broader Make It Fair campaign that's urging people to contact their MPs to object to these plans.
Are there any notable figures who have spoken out about this issue previously?
Yes. BBC News reported that Sir Paul McCartney expressed serious concerns back in January, saying these changes could enable rip-off technology that would make it difficult for artists to earn a living. And according to Perplexity, the government has received over 2,500 responses to their consultation, showing just how significant this issue is to many people.
Are there alternative approaches being used elsewhere that might work better?
The EU has implemented a somewhat similar system, as Perplexity notes. But with important differences, their text and data mining exception allows for data mining provided users have lawful access to the works. Importantly, their model includes mechanisms for right holders to opt out, while emphasizing transparency about training material sources. The debate really centers on finding the right balance between fostering AI development and protecting creators' rights.
Thank you, Ethan, for breaking down this silent but powerful protest for us. It will be interesting to see how the UK government responds as this consultation process concludes.
Absolutely, Grace. With the consultation closing today, all eyes will be on what happens next.
That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Flash 2.0, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.